Three, two, one. Okay, welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast, everyone. My name is Emmy Nixon. As always, this is episode 56. Today is a full basketball podcast. And joining me, as usual, from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Michael Ween. What's up, bro?
What is going on? I'm very excited for this episode. It's our first full basketball episode in a long time, so let's do this.
Yeah, I'm excited. Today we're gonna first we're gonna do our NBA All Star teams, and this will be what we think the team should be, not predicting who the fans and coaches and media will pick. It'll be our opinions on who we think should get the All Star nods, and then we're gonna finish up with college basketball talk. Talk about the main Power Five conferences, and then we're gonna and Big East as well. So today's just gonna be a shorter episode, just two segments, but I hope y'all enjoy it. We haven't done basketball in a while, so
Yeah. But before we get to that, two things. Let's just go ahead and introduce ourselves to our new audience that we're hoping to build on with these next couple episodes. And then secondly, let's take some time to congratulate the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on their Super Bowl victory.
right.
Tom Brady gets his seventh win in the Super Bowl, officially cementing him as the GOAT. No questions asked, no arguments made. He's up here, and everyone else is sort of down here now. So just thought I would mention that, and it's the Buccaneers' second Super Bowl championship. They have now won more Super Bowls than every other team in the NFC South combined. So that's just a stat to throw out there.
Right.
But let's introduce ourselves real quick before we get
Right.
into this.
I got a little bit ahead of myself there, but right, we are expecting a lot of new viewers to our podcast, and we like to welcome you in and thank you for watching first and foremost. And as for myself, I'm Emmy Nixon. I'm a sophomore golfer at Bethany College, and I love sports. I'm a sports nerd in every sense of the word, I guess. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but um, I just have a fascination. I've always had a fascination with just uh, the narrative surrounding sports, just the giving analysis, breaking down of film, and just going into the schematics of the game. And I'm still learning. I'm willing to putting the work to learn as much as I can. And if you're willing to join us on this journey, definitely consider subscribing. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, Google, Amazon, all of those. So, Michael, I'll let you go ahead and give your bio, I guess.
As you said, I'm Michael Ween from Austin, Texas. I am attending the University of Texas here in Austin, as you could probably tell by the shirt that I'm wearing. I am a advertising slash marketing major here at UT. Um, that's a whole nother story what I want to do with that. But I got into sports at an early age. Started by playing soccer and t-ball, which is kind of the younglings version of baseball. And then I transitioned to playing flag football and basketball, which then really sparked my interest in the NFL. My dad introduced me at a very young age to my favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Had me watching a lot of those games, and also had me watching a lot of Spurs games. We were both, or he was a big Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili fan. So, and San Antonio is the closest NBA city to Austin. and we've been in Austin for my entire life. So I grew up watching those two teams, and that kind of sparked my interest into going deeper into the stats, the the nuances of each game. And then lately, I've been trying to expand some. Been following some baseball as of late, mainly the postseason, but uh, trying to follow some other sports. Golf, that's something that we'll also talk about occasionally on this podcast when the majors come around. Emmy's a bigger golfer than I am, but we met in middle school, but we really bonded when I joined our high school golf team, and we were on that golf team for 3 years. But we met in middle school, and we really bonded over sports. And then we kind of a couple years in to our friendship, we both kind of sparked this idea. We both have a huge passion for sports. Why not we do something with it? That's how this podcast was created about 2.5 years ago. So
Right.
we're here, and we're hoping to get better with each and every episode. And so with that, let's just get into this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to start with my Eastern Conference picks.
Okay.
If I'm not sure which you had in mind to start with, but for me, for the starters, I'm just gonna say the guards first. Um,
Okay.
James Harden, and then for the shooting guard spot, this was really tough. Um, I put Jalen Brown / Bradley Beal. I'm kind of, it's either way with those. I think you can't argue with what either of these players have done. Both of these players have been fantastic. In Jalen Brown's case, he's having a career year. Sorry about that. In Jalen Brown's case, he's having a career year, um, career highs in basically every category, and just overall just looks much more confident on the floor. It took another step towards superstardom, really. And then Bradley Beal, he's been doing this for years. He's this year he's raised his scoring to another level. Obviously, the wins aren't there really, but um, that you can't really argue with the amount of input he's really putting out there. He's leading the league in scoring, and it isn't really much else to be said about that. He's doing what he can. So I'll
Do you want me
let
to
you.
follow up?
Yeah, I,
Oh,
yeah,
so Eastern Conference backcourt, I do agree with you. I do have James Harden and Bradley Beal in those starting positions. Now, there is a valid argument, as you said, to be made for Jalen Brown, but I have James Harden and Bradley Beal in those positions. If you look at James Harden, his numbers are down, but he's playing on a superstar studded team, so he's not getting as many shots as he used to. He's still averaging 24 and 11.8 assists, so basically 12 assists, leading the league in this. So he's been fantastic for them. And then Bradley Beal, like you said, leading the league in scoring, and pretty much is one of the only reasons um, the Wizards have won any games to this point. So at least when I watched the Wizards play, which is only like a couple times. So I agree with you there as far as Eastern Conference backcourt goes. So maybe let's talk about the front court.
right. Yeah, I wanted to split this up into parts so we could each give our 2 cents about each player. So for the three spot, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know technically he's a power forward, but I have Kevin Durant in that spot. But it's really interchangeable. It doesn't really matter. It's not really. I don't think there's really specific positions for All Star game. So, and then at center, I have Joel Embiid, who is a MVP candidate up to this point. No argument there. He's been fantastic. And they're number one in the East right now. The 76ers are. So, and he's been leading to wins, and he's just been putting up all the stats you want from a guy like him. And I feel like he's finally putting the things together in terms of being consistent, and I feel like he's been on the court more. He's playing back to backs. He's there, and he's there mentally as well every single night, and that's the biggest thing with Joel Embiid.
Yeah, no argument here with the Eastern Conference um, front court. Is it front court? Yes,
Right?
front
Yeah,
court.
front court. Yeah.
My mind blanked for a second there for a minute. Um, Giannis at the 3 or the 4. You can interchange him and Kevin Durant. Durant's been absolutely insane coming off an Achilles injury,
Right.
pretty much putting up close to 30 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists on over 52% from the floor and 45% from three. Those numbers are just off the charts in all categories. And then you look at Giannis, who, Milwaukee, started kind of slow. I guess for their standards, working in some of those new pieces, trying to feel things out here in the early going. But he's still averaging 27.5 points per game, 11 rebounds, close to 6 assists, a steal, over 1.5 blocks, shooting 56% from the floor. Just Giannis numbers all around. The two-time reigning um, MVP. You have to include him in this. And then absolutely no argument with Joel Embiid. Um, One of the leaders in the clubhouse for MVP at this point. We're like over a third of the way into the season, I believe. So, um, yeah, he's been dominant, more consistent, as you mentioned. And I have a stat here. Not only is he the main reason for the Sixers' success to this point, I believe they're like the 1 or the 2 seed in the East right now, but um, he's made a major difference. It's been a majorly different team when he's off the floor as opposed to when he's on the floor. When he's on the floor, the Sixers are plus 11.3 points per 100 possessions, better than their opponent. To when he's off the floor, they're a -8. So that difference right there just goes to show you the impact that he's having on a nightly basis, and he's being more consistent with his production. So I don't think you can make any arguments with the Eastern Conference front court, Giannis, KD, and Joel Embiid. I think the really only argument when it comes to the Eastern Conference starters is with that shooting guard position, with Bradley Beal, Jalen Brown, whoever you want to argue to put in that spot. But otherwise,
Right.
I think we agree here.
Yeah, in an interesting conversation would have come up if Kyrie didn't miss those 8 games, is
Right,
whether you would put him in the point guard spot over James Harden. But since he
right,
missed those games, I have to give it to James Harden there. Um,
exactly.
One thing I wanted to say about James Harden is he put up a 44 point, 17 assists game in his first game of the year, um, when he was with the Rockets, of course. But that was with no training camp, with new teammates, and I think a lot of people take what James Harden does for granted. I think people are really going to, when he retires, look back and just say, "I wish I would have just appreciated what he did," because some of the shots that he makes are just ridiculous. And I mean, obviously, you can say that about a lot of people, but he's one of a kind for sure.
Exactly. And one note that I forgot to mention on Giannis, um, according to Bleacher Report, when he's on the floor, the Milwaukee offense is scoring 121 points per 100 possessions. That would be the best mark in NBA history. Remember, the Dallas Mavericks set the record last season. They scored, if you round it up, 117 points per 100 possessions. So now, when Giannis is on the floor, Milwaukee is historically the best offense ever. So he's making his impact goes beyond the numbers. So that's just a note that I wanted to mention. But if there's not, I think we agree kind of across the board. And
Right.
if you're Joe, Emmy and I do talk about sports a lot, and so we agree on a lot of the same things.
Right.
Minds kind of think alike. Um, we will disagree occasionally, but I think here we agree. So if you don't have any further facts or anything
Right.
to,
And one of the main things about our show is we tend to agree, but we tend to have different reasons for agreeing. Like we'll still give our own 2 cents here and there, um, based of our opinions being different slightly. So I think that makes it a little better as well. But we'll get into the reserves here. We'll stick with the Eastern Conference. Um, so my reserve list is obviously. Oh my goodness, what is happening? I don't know why that's happening. Okay. Uh, Obviously Bradley Beal or Jalen Brown. That goes without being said since I had them as my starters as well. And then Kyrie Irving, Chris Middleton, Jason Tatum, and Domantas Sabonis. And then my last two reserves are Trey Young and Bam Adebayo. So going down the list here, I already talked about Bradley Beal and Jalen Brown. Kyrie Irving, though, he's shooting 50-40-90 right now. He's been fantastic. He's shooting 42% from three and 94.5% from the line, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And he's doing that while giving better defensive effort overall than we've seen from years past with him. So overall, I think this might be one of the best versions of Kyrie Irving we've seen since he's left Cleveland. I think um, if he stays healthy, uh, he's going to play a huge role in whether this team goes to where they want to go, the Nets team. So moving on, Chris Middleton, uh, he's 50-40-90 as well. He's shooting 51% from the field, 44% from three, 93% from the line. And obviously, like you said earlier, we're only a third of the way into the season, but having this many players shooting 50-40-90 is just completely um, it's unbelievable, honestly. There's only been a few players to ever do that. So if these players are able to hold up doing that, um, that makes it even more impressive. So, but with Chris Middleton, I mean, you have to put him in because just simply from the fact that he's so efficient and every single night he gets his buckets no matter what. Like there's no night where you just like shut down Chris Middleton. Like he's going to get his no matter what. Like his game is not flashy, his game is not super inducive to like highlights, but it's fundamentals based. He's solid every single night and he's pretty good defensively as well. So he's a really good complementary piece when it comes to the Bucks. He's pretty much as good as it gets when it comes to uh, second options. So my next player, Jason Tatum, he had a rough night last night against the Jazz, and that might skew the stats a little bit. But before that game, he was shooting a career high 43.5% from three. So he's shooting is going up as well as his teammate Jalen Brown. So both of those players are ascending even higher than they were last year. Um, but the reason I have him in the reserves rather than Jalen Brown is just I think it's clear that Jalen Brown has been the better player overall this season. He's been, I'd say, more consistent Jason Tatum still has rough nights here and there where he struggles with his shooting, but he's still an all star. I think that's goes without saying. And then my last player, and then I'm going to let you talk here, is Domantas Sabonis. Um, he got the Pacers off to a really fast start out of the gate this season. I don't know if you recall, they got off really hot out of the gates. They won, I think, um, five of the first six or something like that. They've cooled off a little bit, but his play has been solid the entire year, and I think he's still one of the most underrated players in the league. And I think he's one of the players that proves that the post game still exists. He's one of those um, old school '90s style post players. So that's pretty much all I have to say with that. You go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll start with the two Celtics players, Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum. They're both putting up kind of identical numbers. Jalen Brown's averaging 26.7, Tatum's averaging 26.8. They're both throwing out about 6 or 7 assists, three or four assists, averaging 5 to 7 boards. Both are very good defenders. Shooting numbers are pretty good. And they're a big reason to why the Celtics are what they are. As far as Kyrie Irving, yes, he's been box office. If it wasn't for, and you said this earlier, if it wasn't for that 7 or 8 game hiatus that he took for whatever reason, I don't think he ever revealed what the reasons were for that, but yeah, he's been box office ever since, averaging career high in points per game, threes per game, and 3 point percentage. So you have to include him in this. Um, I do agree with Sabonis. Big reason for the Pacers' success. 21 and 12, basically, if you round his numbers up, with 5.5 assists. Shooting numbers are off the charts. But I would make an argument for Julius Randle, the New York Knicks. I don't have him in, but if you look at his numbers, and the Knicks got off to a pretty fast start. Um, 22.3 points, 10.9 rebounds, and 5 point assists. If you round those numbers up, that'd be 22, 11, and 6. And coming into the season, the only players to do that in a season are Wilt Chamberlain, Kevin Garnett, Oscar Robertson, and Russell Westbrook. So he'd be entering rarefied air. So I think there's an argument to be made for Julius Randle. The Knicks have slid kind of as of late, kind of as expected, but they just traded for Derrick Rose, and they've been playing better than I thought they would be. So, and then I do agree with Middleton. He's averaging about 21. He made numbers, 52% from the field, 45% from three, and he gives you that every single night. Very consistent player, and he's also um, dishing out a career high 6 assists. Uh, he's leading that team in assists. So I think you have to include him in this conversation. And then Trey Young, forgot to mention him. Just watched a great game between the Mavericks and Hawks. The Mavericks obviously pulled it out in a thriller, but Trey Young's been fantastic. He's been a reason for winning this year, and the Hawks are right in the thick of things in the East. I think they're like the 7 or 8 seed, if I'm not mistaken. He's averaging about 27 points, 9 assists. His field goal percentage is down a little bit, but he's still shooting about 37% from three, and he's been pretty consistent from out there. So, and the Hawks are winning games, and they're going to be in the thick of things in the Eastern Conference playoff race. So you have to include him in this conversation as well. I think we agree pretty much across the board here. I would just make an argument for Julius Randle. Um,
Right, right. You
yeah,
can definitely make an argument there. I have a few honorable mentions to name as well. Gordon Hayward is one. He's been really good for the Hornets this year. And the Hornets, as of right now, are in the playoffs. So that's a really interesting one. If they're able to hold on to that, I think you can make a really good argument for him. And then Tobias Harris, back in that Dark River system in LA, we saw him uh, be an all-star snub, and now he's back to that form. He's averaging 24 points per game on career high efficiency, shooting nearly 47% from three, which is just crazy. Um, and then Zach Levine, uh, he that's a little bit harder argument to make, but he himself, if you take out the team aspect of like the winning argument, he himself has been fantastic. He's improved um, his efficiency across the board, and he's been better defensively. So you can't really say that he's a one-sided player anymore. He's been much better defensively this year, and I think he's really made a point of doing that. And then lastly, Malcolm Brogdon, he's been really good this year as well. He's averaging 23 points and 7 assists. And with all of the roster movement, especially with that Oladipo trade with the Pacers, he's been a steady hand in that backcourt. And he's been a good leader for them as well. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, you can't really go wrong this year. There's so much talent right now in the NBA where there's like no matter what, there's going to be a lot of really, really good players that miss the All-Star game.
right. And I throw in one more sort of longer shot into that honorable mentions category. I know the Raptors started kind of slow, but Fred Van Vliet has been really good as of late. I think he had like a 54 piece a couple nights ago, and he's putting up about 21 points on 38% from three, throwing out about 6.5 assists, pulling down 4.5 rebounds, and averaging about 2 steals per game as well. So I throw him into that category, but he's kind of a longer shot,
Right. I
I
think
guess.
the Raptors would have to get above 500 for that to happen, but I can see that happening for sure. They're a team that can definitely go on a run.
Right, they've been better as of late, and Fred Van Vliet's a big reason why. So we'll see what happens with that, but with that, we can move to the West.
Right. Okay. Western Conference. Um, so for the West, I have in the backcourt Stephen Curry and Luka Doncic. I'm just gonna go down the list here just completely. And then LeBron, Kawhi, and then Nikola Jokic. Um, Steph, he's been he's been really really good. Like the first couple games of the season, it looked like he wasn't being as aggressive as he needed to be, and that kind of baffled me a little bit. But he's really, I think he was just kind of getting a feel for what he needed to do to get this team, getting a feel for the team since he has so many new teammates. And as soon as he did that, about the fourth or fifth game of the season, he's just been on a tear, and there's been basically nobody in the league that can guard him with the tear that he's been on. It's been unbelievable. 27 points per game, 40% from three um, on about 10 attempts. And without Klay Thompson, he's the one guy on the court that you have to keep an eye on. He's still just going off. It's crazy what he's doing. And then Luka, um, I might be a little bit biased, but I think I think Luka. I think you can make an argument for Damian Lillard taking Luka's spot. But with Luka, he's averaging 27 points per game, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, nearly averaging a triple double. But the main thing is uh, he's been I don't actually. I don't really know how you can. Actually, I think I'm going to change my pick. I'm going to put Damian Lillard over Luca. If I'm being completely subjective and non-biased, I think I have to put Damian Lillard over Luca because Damian Lillard's statistics are comparable and he's getting wins. So I think me putting Luca might have just been a, a byproduct of me just being a Mavs fan. And then LeBron, uh, not really much you can say that hasn't already been said. 36 years old in his 18th year, still doing his thing. You know, he's still the best player in the NBA, and he'll be back in the playoffs again, and he'll be back contending for another championship. Uh, and then Kawhi Leonard, another player who's in the 50-40-90 club as of right now. Um, he's been he's been really underrated in terms of his MVP conversation. He could be a key candidate as well, since his team is third in the West right now, I believe. But that's another conversation for another day. And then Nikola Jokic, um, this is his best scoring season by far, 26.8 points per game on an 8.6 assists and over 10 rebounds. He's a center that is one of a kind in every sense of the word. He can give you 45. He can drop triple doubles. He can do it all. It's just he's so unique as a player.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, let's just get Stephen Curry out of the way. All you really have to say about Stephen Curry is he's putting up very comparable numbers, very similar numbers to the 2015-2016 version of Stephen Curry, who was a unanimous MVP that year. Um, I don't have the statistics like compared to themselves, but they're very similar. There was a Ringer article, the Ringer, very fantastic NBA sports pop culture website, recommend it. That had an article about Stephen Curry and the impact that he's having on the Golden State Warriors. 29.6 points per game, 6 assists, 5.5 boards, shooting about 43% from three. Player efficiency numbers are off the charts, about 25.6. That's top 10 in the league. Um, Now, the interesting spot in each conference is kind of the shooting guard spot. That's really where you have the arguments to be made. I know you could go either way with Lillard or Doncic, but I'm going with Doncic. And I know the Mavs have struggled here in the early going, but they've had a tough schedule and some injuries slash COVID issues to go along with that. So while they went on that 6 game losing streak, they've had some tough games, some tough scheduling breaks, and Luka's been fantastic through it all. Some people say he's having an off year, but he's still putting up close to 28 per game, 9 assists, 9 boards basically on 46% from the field. And his player efficiency numbers are also very good. So you can make the argument if you value winning to this point more, yes, put Damian Lillard in there. But I'd go with Doncic in that spot. And then as far as the front court goes, I agree with you across the board. Kawhi giving you solid production all across the board for a team at the top of the West. Um, we'll talk about his kind of running mate in Paul George, who I have in the reserves. But Kawhi, 26 points per game, close to 2 steals per game, 50% from the floor, great efficiency. Once again, LeBron, there's really, as you said, really can't say anything besides the fact that I'd make the argument he's the leader in the clubhouse for MVP for one of the best teams in the league, the Los Angeles Lakers. Karl Malone is the oldest player to win MVP in 98, 99. And this year, LeBron's a year older at age 36 or whatever he is. And he's putting up sort of a near triple double as well. I mean, 25.6, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. And that net rating is still pretty stout when he's on the floor and when he's off the floor. So, um, really nothing to be said there. And then Jokic, I mean, he's in an article published today by Bleacher Report. It says Jokic has led the league in box plus minus, and he's the only player in the league top 10 in scoring, top 10 in assists, and top 10 in rebounds. The only player in the league to be top 10 in all three of those categories. So you talk about a player that's been fantastic, especially from the center position as a passer and a scorer. Um, you go with Nikola Jokic. So really no arguments there in terms of the front court. But there you go.
Right. What do you
I
think?
think
What do you think about the argument for Anthony Davis being in the starting lineup, maybe over Kawhi? Because I saw some articles put him in over Kawhi, but for me personally, I think Kawhi deserves that spot with all the numbers that he's putting up. Um, but I'd be interested to hear your opinion on it.
yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. When I watch the Lakers, and I've watched them a lot, it seems to me that at points in times, Anthony Davis hasn't been as dominant or aggressive as he should be. There's been moments where he's been kind of lackadaisical on the offensive end of the floor. And I think from a Kawhi standpoint, not only is he still putting up fantastic numbers, averaging 26, I can regurgitate the numbers over and over, but he's playing more games. There hasn't been as much load management um, from what I have seen
Right.
up to this point in the season. And I think you have to reward him for that. So Anthony Davis, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm sure he's still putting up fantastic numbers, but I'd give the spot to Kawhi because I think you have to reward him for playing more games and not resting, load managing as much. That's just my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. But moving on here to the reserves, in no particular order, here's my list. So I have Damian Lillard, Anthony Davis, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and DeMar DeRozan.
Mm.
Um, but obviously, I switched Damian Lillard and Luka Doncic, so that would be Luka Doncic in that number one spot. Um, but I already talked about both of them, so I'm just going to move on to uh, Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis, uh, he's he's it's a no brainer for him being an All Star. The only argument is whether he should be a starter, but I agree with you in terms of some of the things on the eye test this year. I think it might be a bit of championship hangover, or maybe um, I know it's been a lot of basketball. He didn't really have a true off season since he played in the finals, and he probably had the shortest off season of everybody because they were spending a bunch of time celebrating as well. So it might be that. It might be just him going through the motions. Maybe he's not worrying about the regular season as much. But I just find it interesting that he's being a little bit more lackadaisical when you see a guy on his team, LeBron, be laser focused. LeBron hasn't missed one game, and he's just been um, lighting it up all year. He's just been uh, so focused in. It feels like every single game. So that it feels a little bit uncharacteristic of him. But moving on, Donovan Mitchell. Uh, the Jazz have won 17 of their last 18 games. Um, They're top five in offensive and defensive rating. Donovan Mitchell is averaging 23 points, uh, 6 assists, and about 5 rebounds. Um, and he's missed a few games because of a concussion, but overall, his impact has been fantastic. And I think um, the Jazz getting 2 All-Stars is pretty much a formality simply from the fact that they're at the top of the West and uh, they've been the best team overall in the West and the most deserving of 2 All-Stars, I think, um, that you may not have picked beforehand, I'd say. You may not have picked the Jazz to have 2 All-Stars, but now you kind of have to give it to them. Um, and then my last of the first 5 reserves, DeMar DeRozan. Um, the Spurs have been. I'll let you get into the Spurs a little bit more in depth. I'll leave some of that to you since that's your team. But DeMar DeRozan has been fantastic. We saw that first of the doubleheader against the Warriors. He closed that game out. He was fantastic, throwing cross court passes to people, hitting people wide open, getting to his spots in the mid range. Um, I don't know. It just feels like um, him and Pop are on the same page, and I think I think he maybe came into the season wanting to silence some of these trade talks and some of these rumors about the Spurs wanting to get rid of him because he's come to the season with a chip on his shoulder and he's been so good for this team. Like it's hard to explain just how good he's been. He's been so good.
I would love for DeMar DeRozan to get voted to the All Star team because everything you just said is spot on. He's been an integral piece to this San Antonio Spurs early success. It seems he's on a mission, as I said, um, like episode 54 where we did the NBA tiers list. Go back and watch that if you haven't already. Hit the like and subscribe buttons.
Oh, right. We
We'll say
forgot to
that
say that. Right.
we'll
Like and
say that a
subscribe.
lot throughout the podcast. But yeah, I would love for DeMar to get that. I think he's putting up like 20 and close to 5 rebounds and or close to 6 rebounds and close to 6 assists. It seems that his assist production has gone up every year since he's been in San Antonio, and I'm sure some of that can be attributed to just the San Antonio system and I guess just him making plays. But the thing is it's the Western Conference, and there are so many good players that I'm just not sure that he'll get in. But I do have him in because um, he can fit in there in one of those front court spots because he's been playing a lot of that small forward, power forward spot for the Spurs um, here this season, and that's something that they transitioned into last year in the bubble play, where they started to play really well, incorporate more of their young talent, the DeJounte Murrays, the Keldon Johnsons, who's been absolutely fantastic, the Lonnie Walker, all those guys started to get more playing time. And that's really carried over into this season. Since this is who I would pick, yes, I do have DeRozan, but I will say I'm not sure there are going to be enough spots to fit him in, although that he is, of course, very deserving. But I do have pretty much the same as you. Anthony Davis, it's a given that he's going to get an All Star nod pretty much every year. That's just how good he is. Whether it's as a starter or a reserve, well, you can argue that, but he's still top 5 player in the league. So you have to include him in this. Donovan Mitchell, yes, have to put him in here, averaging 24. Big reason the Jazz are like, well, what are they? one in the West. They're 20-5. That is just insane.
Right.
And as you said, they've won what, like 17 of 18 games.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Amazing. And I know I'm sidetracking a little bit here that just over a year ago, or actually under a year ago, we weren't even sure that Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, those two players, were going to be able to work out this whole COVID situation. They were having big problem over the whole COVID press comp. You remember the whole situation. It wasn't looking good as far as their relationship was concerned. Um, just under a year ago, and now look at them. They're gelling. This is a team that's been together now for a couple of years, and it's it's working. I mean, they are playing very good. So you gotta include him and Rudy Gobert, I'd say, in this conversation. A guy I want to include is Devin Booker. The Suns are fourth in the West, sitting 5 games above 500. So if the playoffs start today, and I know it's early, they get a home playoff series. And Booker is averaging about 23 um, on good shooting numbers for the Phoenix Suns. So I don't know. It's going to be tough because there's only a certain amount of spots, but you have to include him in these conversations. And then is there anyone I'm missing? Oh yeah, Paul George has to be in here as well, along with Damian Lillard. So I don't know how many guys I just mentioned, or if I went over the
I
limit,
think
but
you're right on the number. I listed my first five reserves, so I still have two more I didn't mention. My last two spots were Paul George and then Devin Booker. So those are the two guys you just mentioned. Um, but I really wanted John Morant to be in, but there wasn't enough spots. There just wasn't. And with him missing those games, um, it's hard to get those all star spots in the West. It's basically you have to be flawless to get in. So John Morant, De'Aaron Fox, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, all those guys like that, they're just gonna barely miss. So
yeah, it's just life is such in the Western Conference with all
right.
these good players and all these good teams. So is there anything else that we are forgetting to mention? Um,
I don't think so.
yeah,
I think we can hop right into our college basketball talk.
I do believe that the All-Star starters get announced on like the 15th or 16th.
Yeah, I think on the 16th.
Okay, so you know, about a week, just under a week, I guess, until those get announced. So good thing that we're getting this out here now. Give y'all a couple days to chew on this before the actual starters do come out. And then in a future episode, and we've done this before, we'll probably do a draft where we draft our own teams because that's been a good segment that we've done in the past. So we'll get to that in a future episode. But let's transition into our second segment, college basketball. Now, if you are new to this podcast, um, you know that, or you will learn that I am a big college basketball fan, bigger than just, I guess, more of a casual basketball fan that just watches later into the regular season and into the conference tournaments, and of course, March Madness, because who doesn't watch March Madness? And I'm kind of starved to talk about college basketball. One, because we didn't get March Madness last year. So it's going to be coming up on 2 years here in March since the last NCAA tournament game was played. So that's number one. Number two is we haven't talked a lot of college basketball up to this point in this season, and it's already getting to mid February. And we're about 30 days away from Selection Sunday. And before you know it, conference tournaments are going to be starting here in about 2 or 3 weeks. So, the segment that we're going to be doing today, we're going to be looking at the Power Five conferences and the Big East, because the Big East is a big basketball conference or a notable basketball conference. And we're going to be ranking sort of those conferences based off the teams within them and how competitive the conferences are. So we'll just get this started.
Right.
Um,
Do you want to start with ACC? That's your conference. You're a fan of Virginia, so
I'm still a fan of Virginia, but I think I'm going to go. We have 6 conferences that I really want to talk about. I think we're going to go in, I guess, um,
Big 12.
from 6 to 1. Actually, no, let's go. Yeah, let's go 6 to 1. Let's get the Pac-12 out of the way,
Okay.
because not that they're a bad conference, but they're just not as good as any of these other conferences are.
Right.
And this has been a kind of a trend here in the past couple of years. You had the one run that Oregon made that one year, a couple of years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, where they got to the Final Four and eventually lost. But other than that, the Pac-12, I mean, UCLA hasn't been as good as of late. A lot of the blue bloods are struggling. UCLA is, they're not struggling, but they're not ranked in the AP top 25. There's only one team that I really see um, posing any sort of threat to make a run into the second weekend of the tournament, meaning Sweet 16 or Elite Eight. That's what second weekend means. And that's USC, the Trojans. They're 15-3. They're the only Pac-12 team ranked in the top 25, and they have coveted NBA prospect, the center Evan Mobley, who's been fantastic and is far and away the best player in the entire conference. So he'll be a top 5, top 10 pick come June in the NBA draft. Um, they're the only Pac-12 team also to rank both in the top 25 in offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. Now, there are a couple other teams in this conference that will make the tournament, Oregon and UCLA being a couple of them, along with Colorado, who's been pretty impressive as of late. But when it comes to the Pac-12, when I assess the strength of a conference, you have to have some teams that are actual legit threats to get the ultimate prize, the Final Four, the national championship. And I just don't see that with any of these teams. So it's not that they're a terrible conference, it's just they're not as strong as any of these other conferences. So that's my take on the Pac 12. Um, I know Emmy is not as big of a college basketball watcher as I am. So he doesn't, I guess, know as much as I do. So if you don't have anything you want to say about Pac-12, we can get
Um,
into we can get
yeah,
into the
I'm not really sure what there really is to say. I mean, I think even for the big college basketball fans, I feel like Pac-12 games are so they're they're on the West Coast, so they're so late at night that they're hard to watch to begin with, and then add on to the fact that the quality is not as good as some of these other Power Five conferences. Um, it doesn't make for uh,
yeah.
must see TV. Let's just say it like let's just to say it lightly. It doesn't really make for must see TV. So
I would say going into the Pac-12 tournament, I will say do get a chance to watch Evan Mobley, because
right,
he's going to be potentially a top 5 pick. Definitely, as long as he stays healthy and nothing Insane happens down this last month or two of the season. But I will say for those casual fans out there, if you're going to watch a Pac 12 game, make it be the USC Trojans.
Right.
Okay, let's mention the Big East. The Big East, in the Big East, if you aren't familiar, you have Villanova. That's kind of your blue blood in the Big East Conference. They've been pretty damn good as well this year, 12-2. They did lose a not so great game to St. John's earlier or I believe it was last week, but they've dealt with some COVID issues. They haven't played as many games as some of these other teams, but they're still fantastic. Road win over Texas, some other really good quad one wins, and then you have Creighton. Um, and these two teams, I can see making legit runs to like Elite Eight, Final Four. Um, you know about Jay Wright. He's been there, done that, right? Um, this Villanova, this Villanova team, while it may not be as strong as I guess past title teams, they're still going to be a force to be reckoned with when it comes to March Madness. And then Creighton, um, they're one of the best offensive teams um, when it comes to offensive efficiency, and they're dangerous. They got some really good players on that team. I'm not going to get into to the specifics. We'll get into that in a future episode, but just for the sake of time. But they are legit, 15-5, some good wins mixed in there, and I believe Creighton does play Villanova in a nationally televised game this Saturday. So if you're free, I suggest tuning into that if you can. And then they do have a couple other teams I do see making the tournament, but I guess these teams don't pose as big as of a threat. Xavier is there every year, but they really never seem to do anything um, when it comes to March Madness. So I find it hard, despite their really good record. I find it kind of hard to take them really seriously. And Seton Hall, they're also a perennial tournament team. You see them in there as like an 11 seed every year, and sometimes they make a run occasionally, but it's just hard for them because of the talent gap that exists between them and some of the other teams in college basketball. So those are two very good teams, but it's just hard to take them seriously based on small sample size and the fact that they don't usually seem to fare well in an NCAA tournament environment. So that's the Big East. I think you're going to see 4 or 5 teams getting in. That's usually how it is every year. I could make an argument UConn will get in as well. But the reason I ranked the Big East ahead of the Pac 12 is because they have the two teams that I can see getting to the Final Four. Whereas the Pac 12 only has, I guess, throw USC in there. Why not? It's a 2-to-1 ratio. So, um,
Right.
do you have anything you want to say?
Um, One thing that I do know about college basketball, I may not follow it that much, but like I may not know players, but I do know programs. And one thing I do know is that Jay Wright, in terms of developing players, that's evident every single year by not only the success of the Villanova program, but also some of those players having success in the NBA. We just talked about Malcolm Brogdon, what he's doing in the NBA. He's a former. Wait, no, he
He's
played at Virginia. What the heck am I talking about? Um, Guys like Dante DiVincenzo and Jalen Brunson, guys like that who are really fundamentally sound. And stuff like that is really important in college basketball. And you're seeing that this year. I saw the game early in the year between Villanova and Texas. Jeremiah Robinson Earl is a player I really like. Um, and they have some really good shooters on this team. And one thing in the tournament that's been really evident these past few years is you got to be able to shoot the three ball well. When you're playing elite defensive teams, sometimes the three ball is the only thing you're gonna get, and you got to be able to knock those shots down. And I feel really good about Villanova's chances because they've got shooters up and down their roster.
Yes. And also, when it comes to Villanova, they're usually pretty experienced. They don't have a lot of these one and done. As good as their players are, Jay Wright likes to keep them in that system for a couple years and develop them, and that's why you see players like Jalen Brunson and Dante DiVincenzo um, make an early impact when it comes to the NBA. So that's another factor. And if you got to know one thing about college basketball, it's that coaching and experience matters a lot, especially when you get to tournament time. So when you have Jay Wright and a lot of experience and players that can shoot, you're in good shape.
Right.
So Villanova is going to be there, whether you like it or not.
Right.
So that, and then watch out for Creighton. They are a team that when you're filling out your bracket, and I guess it will all depend on the draw and who gets who, but they're going to be dangerous. They're going to be dangerous. So just keep that team in mind when
Right.
you're filling out those brackets. All right. The fourth conference, I should say, I have on my list is the ACC.
Okay.
Usually, the ACC is at the top of this list, or at least the past decade, that's been the case, but not this year. And there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, the blue bloods of this conference, I should say, well, Virginia, I kind of call them a new blood because they've only been really, um, I guess, a perennial national championship contender for like the last decade or so. But the blue bloods, I'm talking about Duke and North Carolina, they've been pretty bad, especially Duke. Duke has their first losing record since 1999. So it's been, I guess, 22 years since they had a losing record. And right now, they have a losing record. And it's going to take a miracle for them to get into the NCAA tournament field. They're usually right at the top of this conference, but this year, for some odd reason, it's just not working out for Coach K. Carolina probably will make the tournament, but they haven't been as good, and they have some really, I guess, bad losses mixed in there. I really don't understand, but we'll go deeper into this as we get closer to the tournament. But let's talk about what's good about the ACC. Virginia is still really good. Tony Bennett doing another fantastic job. Virginia, 14-3. I am still a supporter of Virginia. And I probably will be even an even bigger supporter given that my sister just got into UVA and is seriously considered going to UVA. It's not nothing's official yet, but it's kind of trending in that direction. They are still the defending national champions technically 2 years ago. Um, we can get into the players in a later episode, but one of the things I'll say about Virginia is they're turning into, not only are they still very good on defense, but they've also turned into an offensive juggernaut. They're putting out their highest points per game output by a lot this year here in the Tony Bennett era, and that's dangerous. When you have a team that is dominant on both ends, watch out. And then Florida State. Those are kind of the two teams I'd look out for to make Final Four runs out of this conference. You can throw also Virginia Tech into this conversation, veteran team, um, with some experience, great from an outside shooting perspective, and I could see them getting hot at the right time and making a deep run. Those are kind of the three teams I see as like Elite Eight, Final Four good. Maybe not so much Virginia Tech, but definitely Virginia and Florida State. Um, both of which I call kind of new bloods. Leonard Hamilton's done a really good job at Florida State. Seems like every year now he's putting players into the NBA draft, um, more so than I guess Virginia is. But yeah, those two programs are very good. Um, I think you can say probably 6 or 7 teams will still get in from the ACC because it's not a bad conference. It's just since the blue bloods are down this year, we can't elevate it above the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC. So we'll go deeper into this in a future like each of the teams in a future episode. But just for the sake of conferences, when I look at the ACC, they're just a little bit better than the Big East because of the depth. But teams like Clemson and Georgia Tech and Pittsburgh will probably be vying for a tournament bid here down the stretch. I see like 6 or 7 teams getting in, but definitely watch out for Virginia, Florida State, and Virginia Tech. If you're going to watch an ACC game, those are the three teams you got to be paying attention to.
Right. The first thing I think about when you say that the two main blue bloods are down is COVID. I mean, it kind of feels like maybe since these are the two teams that tend to lean on freshmen uh, giving them production, maybe them not having a true like traditional college basketball season, I guess. Maybe that played a role in some of their struggles that they've had. Um, but I mean, I'm not an insider with the team, so I would have to read up a little bit more on that. But um, a little bit of what I'm thinking based on just some of the teams that have risen up from some of the main guys going down is just uh, coaching. You see the good coaches rise above because I think obviously Florida State and all those teams they have talent, but um, one thing that all three of those teams you just mentioned have in common: Virginia Tech, Florida State, and Virginia, they all defend at a really high level and they execute um, in late in the second half and close out close games. And that's the biggest difference to me between them and a team like Georgia Tech or Pittsburgh or teams like that.
Exactly. Exactly. The coaching is a huge factor. Leonard Hamilton and Tony Bennett are two of the best in the business. And Leonard Hamilton gets overlooked a lot, but he is one of the best. He ranks probably top 10 for me. If I were to rank my coaches now, he's doing a fantastic job, not only recruiting, but developing his players to go to the next level. And that's a big reason for that team's success. And one thing about Florida State is they are very athletic. That's one thing that stays consistent with that program from year to year. They get long, athletic guys that are good on the defensive end of the floor, that are versatile offensively, and that's what makes them dangerous. And as far as Virginia, they're just fundamentally sound. They're going to slow the game down, play fantastic defense. Tony Bennett is going to implement that pack line defense as the season goes along. And with guys like Sam Hauser, who is a transfer from Marquette that you may not be familiar with, but he's really given this team an offensive spark. And then Jay Huff is another name to know. a junior, a 7 foot center, can stretch the floor, shoot it from three. Kind of reminds me of like a Frank Kaminsky type, but I think he'll have a bigger impact in the NBA just because I think he's more skilled down in the low block and um, what he can do off the dribble for a 7 footer is also really impressive. Virginia is one of the best front courts in college basketball with Hauser and Huff, the two H's, as I like to call them. So, or the H brothers, or whatever you want to call them. So, and then obviously Kihei Clark, now entering his, I think it's his third year. Yeah, because his freshman year was
National championship. Yeah.
national championship. So he's really grown into a very good point guard. The size is something that he gets knocked for, but for a guy his size, he's fantastic on defense, and he's putting up really good numbers, especially from beyond the arc. Has really grown as a shooter. So that's kind of a rundown of those two teams. Um, Virginia playing really well. They got beat down by Gonzaga in like mid December. But Gonzaga does that to pretty much everyone. So in Virginia, if you know anything about Virginia, and I know I'm kind of ranting, but they've implemented also some new players. And it takes time, it takes a month or so to really learn that Tony Bennett pack line defense and to really get comfortable in that system. So they were having some struggles early, but now as we get closer to the tournament, they're starting to figure things out offensively and defensively. Dangerous.
Right.
Again, when it comes to the tournament. All right. So if you don't have anything else to add, let's let's mention the SEC because they're also a very good conference. Now, very similarly to the ACC, the one blue blood in that conference, Kentucky, is just having, let's just say, not so good of a season. Um, they've only won like 5 or 6 games. They've played a really tough schedule, but um, they're they're pretty much done at this point as it's concerned to hopes to make the tournament. But teams like Missouri, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, all these teams have risen to the top, and they're going to put probably 6 or 7 teams into the tournament. So if you want to add anything in when it comes to that.
Well, one thing I would want to ask you is, what do you think? Um, why do you rank SEC above the ACC when it comes to conference ranking?
I think it's just a matter of depth. Um, I think that um, I know that Virginia and Florida State are really good, and they would probably be, I guess, well, yeah, Virginia would be atop the SEC right now for sure. But I'm looking at Tennessee, I'm looking at Alabama, I'm looking at Missouri, I'm looking at Florida. All they have to do is get healthy, and I'm looking at Arkansas. Has also been really good. All 5 of those teams, I think you can make a legit argument that they could make a run to like Sweet 16, Elite Eight. Whereas with the ACC, I think only like 2 or 3 teams will probably be in that conversation. And the fact that the SEC, I believe, has more teams ranked than the ACC does, and it's close. But I like the depth, and I also like the bottom of the conference. I think the bottom of the SEC is more talented. Teams at the bottom of the SEC are more talented than the teams at the bottom of the ACC. That's just my opinion. But it's close. I think they're like neck and neck. But I guess we should get to, because I've kind of been ranting, the two best conferences, and that's
Right.
Big Ten and the Big 12. And these are the two conferences you probably are most familiar with, um, given that Texas obviously is in the Big 12, and when you watch college basketball, a lot of the Big 12 games are aired on national TV, and the same goes with the Big 10. Now, how you rank them, well, it's up to you. They're pretty much like 1A and 1B. They're that close. I put the Big 10 slightly above the Big 12, but that's just because teams like Texas and Kansas and Oklahoma State have struggled as of late. Those were teams that were kind of near the top of the rankings about a month ago, but they've kind of fallen off as of late, whereas the Big Ten is solid all the way through. Um, I'll give my quick 2 cents and then I'll let you chime in. When it comes to the Big 12, just know that while Gonzaga is really, really good, I think Baylor is the best team in the country. They're 17-0. They play in a tougher conference than Gonzaga, playing tougher competition, and they've won all 17 of their games by 8 or more points. Just been dominant um, all throughout the year. So, and when it comes to offensive and defensive efficiency, Gonzaga is a little bit better on offense, but Baylor's a lot better on defense. I mean, they can switch at all five positions. The defensive versatility with Baylor is just insane. And they guard for all 40 minutes. There is no quit and there is no like let up, take your foot off the gas type thing with this Baylor team. And another thing is, all five of those players in that starting lineup, we're talking about Jared Butler, Maceo Teague, Davion Mitchell, some of the other guys they have in that starting lineup. Mark Vital is another guy, the center. They can all shoot the three, and they all shoot it at a very good clip. So while Gonzaga's going to be dangerous, probably will get to the Final Four, given it's going to take probably an injury or something weird to kind of slow either of these teams down. That's just how good they are. They're in a tier by themselves when it comes to, I guess, ranking the teams. But um, I just think the gap between Baylor and Gonzaga defensively and the competition that they play on a night in, night out basis elevates Baylor over Gonzaga. That's how good they are. And then the depth off the bench. We'll get into that in a later episode. But Baylor's just all around. I mean, there's really no holes when it comes to the Baylor Bears. So, and then obviously with the Big 12, you have West Virginia. Oklahoma's been hot as of late, beating four top 10 teams in like their last 6 games. Texas kind of fallen off as of late, but I think they'll be okay. They just need to clean up some of these. They just need to be better when it comes to the details. They're one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the country, and that can kill you when it comes to the NCAA tournament. And they're also lackadaisical sometimes when it comes to securing rebounds and taking care of the ball on offense. So while I like a lot of their pieces and they're one of the more experienced teams in not only the Big 12 but in the country, and they have some very good wins, and all their losses are like quad one losses. It's not like they're losing to trash every night. They play in the Big 12. They got to play Baylor, and they had to play Villanova earlier in the year. They lost to Oklahoma. They lost to all these teams that are ranked in the top 20. So I think they'll be fine. They just got to clean up some of the details. And then Texas Tech and Oklahoma State with Cade Cunningham are also both teams to watch out for. So 7 out of the 10 teams will most likely make the tournament. And I could make an argument for an eighth with TCU, but their resume isn't really as strong right now. They need a couple more quality wins heading in here to elevate into the field, but I can make an argument for TCU as well. So And then the Big Ten, right now they have three teams ranked within the top six. Michigan, only one loss, but they've been kind of suspended here for the past week or so with a COVID outbreak. So haven't gotten to watch them play as much, but when I have watched them, they've been great. And then Illinois and Ohio State have also been really good. And then you have Iowa and Wisconsin also up there, but both of those teams have struggled as of late. But that's also because it's the Big Ten. You're going to lose some games. So that's my, I guess, 2 cents without going on for too long. I'll let you chime in here with a couple thoughts.
Right. Right. Sorry. My voice cracked right there. Yeah. Uh, wow. When I texted you earlier when I was doing my prep, I texted you. I was like, "Does Baylor have any weaknesses?" And you just straight up said, "No." Um, that's that's unbelievable to me. That's wild to me. I saw a game they played earlier this year. I can't remember who they were playing, but I believe it was I believe it was in Hawaii, or it was like a conference mashup series, kind of like where they a conference plays a conference. Um, and I mean, you're right. I mean, in order to be as good as what they're doing, I mean, there's no way you can make any mistakes.
Yeah,
They're relentless defensively. They swarm all around. And one thing you mentioned is their switchability. That's one thing that I think is underrated when it comes to college basketball. You don't see it as much in college basketball. You see a lot of hedging and recovery when it comes to pick and roll. But being able to switch and not even have to worry about people taking advantage of matchups, I think that's a huge advantage because you're not having to rotate at all. You're just boom, you're there. So props to
exactly.
them being so dominant. They're unbelievable so far this year. And then I wanted to say a few things about Texas. Like you said, they as of late they've struggled a little bit, um, but I think you're right. I think they'll be fine. When you look when you think about how this team is shaped up, um, a lot of veteran guard play. Uh, what's his name? Coleman, something
Matt
Coleman.
Coleman,
Matt Coleman, right? Matt Coleman is really good. Um, and then you have Andrew Jones as well. And then the front court, you got Jericho Sims, Greg Brown, and you have a lot of length. So those guards can be aggressive defensively. They can get in the passing lanes, knowing that if they get into the lane, they got to deal with all that length. So when you're able to play with when you're able to play with house money as a guard and not have to worry about getting beat, um, that makes it so much easier. And I think that's going to play a role in the tournament. I think people are going to really struggle to score in the paint against Texas. Um, I
right?
think they're just going through a stretch where they're playing teams that match up well with them. They're able to spread them out with their shooting, but not every team is going to be able to do that. So
Exactly. Yeah,
they're a team that's built for March, and we'll have to see how that goes because they've had a not very good history in March. But this is a new team, so we'll have to see. And then I'll say a few things about the Big 12. Um, Iowa was a team early in the year that was really intriguing to me. Luca Garza, I don't know what he's been doing as of late, but early in the year, he was hooping. He was unbelievable. He was a guy that I had never heard of. So he came out of nowhere, and I was like, wow, is he going to be a lottery pick? Like, he's doing everything out there. But as you said, they've been struggling lately also. I think February is the point in time in the year where fatigue starts to set in, injuries start to set in a little bit, and I
right.
think by the time they're I think this is the point in time where a lot of teams are being cautious about injuries with their key players. And I think by the time their conference tournaments come around, they'll be healthy and all these teams will be at their best. So I wouldn't worry about any of those teams that are struggling right now, that are ranked.
Yeah, you hit everything right on the head. I'm very impressed. One thing you mentioned is you kind of piggybacked off my um, Baylor point about the defense and the switchability. And one thing I wanted to say was not only, well, I'll just throw out a couple stats because that's just what I do,
Right.
as Barack Obama likes to
Yeah.
say.
The stat king.
They're third in offensive efficiency and third in defensive efficiency. So they're pretty much even on both ends of the floor. Um, and as I said, they're a lot better on defense than Gonzaga is, and that's why I have them number one as opposed, well, you know. But I went to the Texas Baylor game last week. I think it was last Tuesday, and they were switching Mark Vital, who's built kind of like he doesn't have like the athleticism or the skills of Zion Williamson, but he's built like Zion and he doesn't move as well. But they were switching him onto Andrew Jones, Courtney Ramey, and and Matt Coleman, excuse me. So that just goes to show you, and he was playing good, very good perimeter defense. So that just goes to show you kind of the that's a mini example of the switchability that this Baylor team has. And I want to say a couple things about Texas, just because I think it's warranted. Number one, Andrew Jones, I think, has been probably one of the best, if not the best story in college basketball. Coming off a hip surgery, not a lot of people know that he also had hip surgery. Um, I guess it was a torn labrum. He's coming off of that, and he's also coming off of the chemo treatments that he had for being diagnosed with leukemia a couple of years ago. So uh, he's had to gain some weight, get back into basketball shape, and in Big 12 play, he's been one of the best players in the conference, averaging about 19 points per game in Big 12 play, which is just insane. And then you mentioned um, the veteran, um, the veteran backcourt of this team, the three guards that they have. Andrew Jones being a junior, um, Courtney Ramey's a junior, and then Coleman's a senior, and they're all very good. They just got to clean up some of these careless turnovers. And as far as the front court, you mentioned the length, and I think that's a very good point. Um, Not only Sims and Greg Brown, who are both fantastic on defense and give you occasional spurts of great offense, but Kai Jones coming off the bench. He's been a guy that's been put in, and he's only a sophomore. So we don't know if he'll actually come out and what his draft evaluations will say. But he's a guy that NBA teams are going to like. This is your new big, your new modern big in the NBA. He's a guy who can run the floor, very athletic, he's very good rim protector. He's a rim runner, and he shows I guess spurts of being able to create out on the perimeter. So that's another guy, long, lengthy defensively, rim protector, production off the bench to watch out for when it comes to Texas. And they also just got back Jace Febris from a foot injury. He's coming off the bench now. So they're getting more bench production than they already had when they started 10-1 or a top five team in the country. So those are just a couple things. And I could go on and on with this. But since we're sort of ranting now, I think that should do it.
Yeah, I think that's gonna wrap this up, guys. thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And like we said earlier in the show, if you're new here, definitely consider subscribing. We're going to be pumping out content here pretty consistently. Obviously, with the football season over, we're not going to be talking, we're not going to be recapping games or anything like that when it comes to football, but we're going to be doing some NFL draft stuff. And I'm actually really excited about some of the NFL draft research I've been doing to prepare for that. So keep that in mind.
I
We're going
watch
to,
that and watch out for number one, another quarterback trade could be coming by the time that we record another episode, which will
right,
be 4 or 5 days. And also watch out for probably in our next episode or the one after, we need to address the coaching hires because we haven't
right,
done that. We've been kind of putting that off. So we'll be doing
right,
that along with all the draft stuff. So even
right.
though football season's over, the talk won't stop, and then obviously basketball will continue to be a big part of this. So
And I think you might see a March Madness episode where we just make our brackets. I think that could be a good little mini podcast as well. So that's going to do it, y'all. Thank you for watching, and have a good day, have a good evening, whatever it is for y'all. Uh, Peace out. Where's the end record button? Ah, there it is.